So Virginia made allegations against Prince Andrew at 3 separate locations.
So what happened when you doorstepped one of the locations?
So
Virginia Giuffre, who accused Prince Andrew of sexual assault, has died.
what she said about the island was the most heinous, because she said she was at a swimming pool orgy. She was told, you're going to have to do this with the prince. The timing of Virginia's unalivement is really suspicious, extremely suspicious.
It was reported she'd been in a serious car crash.
My theory is that I'm going to allege that Bill Clinton was a serial rapist.
It would be naive of me to suggest he might just have been going for a holiday.
Savile got away with it. The answer to that is extremely complex. The only thing he seemed to care about was his dead mum.
Feared in every girls' school in this country.
So I was in about 12 different facilities.
Right.
The first 26 months I was in the jail with the highest rate of death in America. And then they cut my girlfriend off, and my lawyer comes and sees me and says, yeah, they've doubled your charges now, you're facing 200 years. So I planned to unalive myself so I could sit with the cockroaches and just bleed out.
61% of regular Heretics viewers haven't subscribed yet. Can I ask you a favour? If you love these fearless conversations, hit subscribe now, because it's free, takes 2 seconds, and powers our mission.
Shaun Attwood, welcome to the show.
About time you had me on to talk about the satanic paedophile elites running the world, Andrew, isn't it?
All the things you can't talk about on YouTube that Shaun has deliberately brought up in the first few seconds. Now, Shaun's a character that many of you will know, some will not. We'll go into your life stories towards the end. I want to get straight into, some of the stuff you were just talking about. Well, mainly Virginia Giuffre's that was in the news. Who is Virginia Giuffre, for those who don't know? And what happened?
I just want to add, I got the 9/11 train to get here. That is like...
Did you actually?
That's fate, yeah.
Shaun wants to talk about 9/11 because he has some beliefs around it. And he got the...
I can prove things.
You can't prove things. And you got the 9/11 train. Did you really? The 9/11 train?
Jen's like, tell Andrew that. You got to get me to say some 9/11, Jen. Tell Andrew that.
About the 9/11. We might talk about 9/11 later.
Okay.
At least you don't seem to go into the dancing Israelis. Anyway.
No, it's the insider trading.
Yeah.
Linked to the CIA.
All right. Well, look.
Was he Krongard?
Shaun is one of the smartest people I know.
Thanks.
Some intelligent people's minds can go certain ways, but we'll see. And half the audience will agree with what you're saying, anyway. And half will not. But tell me about Virginia Giuffre.
Well, R.I.P. Virginia. So, we've known Virginia now for 5 or 6 years. We've been collaborating with her. We've got the survivor community back before my channel got nuked. We had lots of views on that subject, and everyone was coming on, the survivors, the activists, authors, researchers, and we built a very strong community. But as is the case with these communities, there's a trajectory where a lot of people end up falling out and they never come back together again. So Virginia went dark on the survivors quite a while before she was found unalived.
I see.
She was going to come on my channel, but her lawyers kept stopping her.
Had she been on before?
No.
But she was part of the whole sort of survivor community.
She was the tip of the spear. She was on X, just launching. She brought Prince Andrew to his knees. So many of the survivors were inspired by her. She rocked the world. She got settlements off Glenn, off Jeffrey, off Prince Andrew. And it was all those lawsuits that opened that can of worms that everybody just got in there.
How did you feel when you saw that she'd been in this car accident? This was a few days before she was found dead, and said, in a few days I'll be dead. And then in a few days she was, but by other means.
Extremely suspicious. So the worldwide media announcement of that, they had intercepted a personal message to her family whereby the doctor had said to her, if you don't get this treatment, you've got 4 days to live. And then she posted this picture of her all bruised up, which didn't add in with the police report from the bus crash and other things that had been noticed surrounding that bus crash. What we have learned since then is that she's a victim of domestic violence. In the paperwork that Dershowitz presented when he was countersuing her, Dershowitz, we took a page out of it whereby he says that Virginia was supposed to appear at a TV appearance, but because she was so bruised from being battered by her husband, she couldn't make it.
Bloody hell.
Yeah. So we interviewed a lady called Murray, who was an advocate in Australia for decades against domestic violence, who lives 15 miles from one of Virginia's properties. And it was Murray who really opened our eyes to the level of domestic violence that had been going on. She said it's happened shortly after, he'd saved her from the clutches of Epstein, because she had a sad life of, at 6 or 7 years old, a PDF in her family took advantage of her. Before Epstein, she was in the hands of a guy called Eppinger, who was also a human transporter, who was doing these heinous things to her. So her whole life was marred by these evil people who had come into her. And then when she flew to Thailand to do the massage course, which Maxwell sent her on, she met her husband, and he was a martial arts instructor, and they struck it off and, were in love and all this stuff. And he's the one who she ended up sending that message back to Epstein and Maxwell saying she wasn't coming back, leaving their heads just completely spinning. And then she took off, went to Australia with him. That's why she was living in Australia. Perth is where he was based. His property was in Perth, but then she branched out when they separated to get this farm out in the middle of nowhere where she was living with her 71-year-old carer and her stepbrothers.
She had a 71-year-old care, like a foster care.
Which adds to the even more suspiciousness of the story, because we found quotes from her ex-husband saying that Virginia had broken her neck, no explanation given, and he'd helped accommodate this 71-year-old carer at that property. There was dozens of acres of property, this huge farm. She got this 71-year-old woman. I mean, the woman had experience on ranches, but come on now.
So what do you think?
So my theory is that she was pharmacided. And this is quite common. So because nobody looks at it as a murder, unless, like with Michael Jackson, they did. So what happens with pharmacide is you have outside stressors putting pressure on the subject. And in Virginia's case, even boys, when he was on, Piers Morgan, her lawyer, one of them, said he classified them as Epstein collaborators, were still harassing her to this day. You've got Lady Victoria Hervey, who trolled not only the bus accident, but trolled her death. She put it on one of her stories. People said that she had retracted that, but it was just on a story that disappeared. Trolling Virginia's death. So you've got all these evil, dark forces from, the Epstein days and all of these other enablers of the PDFs trying to shut her up. Because, she's outed Prince Andrew, but can you imagine how many other big names she's privy to?
Yeah.
It's because these vested interests putting the pressure on her. At the same time, you've got a Dr. Feelgood type character increasing the medication as she's getting the stress, wanting her to take more medication. So that's pharmacide.
Might have sort of, as in PH Pharma. Is that what that is?
As in a cocktail of drugs from Big Pharma.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a crazy thing, because I think a lot of people, you and I disagree a lot often on the conspiracy side of things. I think we don't necessarily disagree that certain things happened. It's just that I often think it's just because people are idiots and things happen because they're stupid. Whereas I think you see more of an evil string puppet kind of thing going on. But it's been really hard for people like me to go like, oh no, come on, stop it with these conspiracies. And then Epstein was one of them, involving the royal family, that turned out to be true. But so now I'm looking at it going, gosh, was Giuffre then, did she just take her own life, or did something happen to her? And it now feels like it's very likely that somebody, maybe as you say, put pressure on, fed her drugs, and that's what led
She was on a cocktail of Big Pharma meds because she had kidney problems and because of the pain from the abuse, and we don't know what else. So she had a host of medical conditions, and we're waiting for the autopsy to see what meds it says she was on the day she died. I mean, one of my favorite shows was Autopsy on Netflix. Did you ever watch any of those?
No.
Where they would do autopsies on like Michael Jackson and
real documentary.
and Whitney Houston.
Yeah.
And the lists of all the chemicals they were on. Like dozens of them.
That's mad.
They'll just take a paracetamol, mate.
They get hooked on these things, don't they?
Yeah. And they got these quack Dr. Feelgood doctors just...
My grandma was on a lot of those things. My dad's mum. They said in the end she was on, like, actually literally enough that would have taken down an elephant. No. That's what she was, because they get so addicted, they get hooked on it. But that was that film, I mentioned it before, the Requiem for a Dream. Did you ever watch that?
Oh my goodness. Like, me and Jen watched it last year, one of my favourite movies.
It's a great film.
The double dildo scene.
Yeah. I don't remember that. But, you know,
at the end when it's all coming to like this peak.
I think you watched a different film, Sean.
Well, to get the drugs, they got the girl going and she's doing the stripping, and they go to this house party with the guy and they got the double.
Oh, it's a pretty crazy film.
Dark.
Yeah.
Really dark.
But there was the old woman, do you remember the mum?
Oh, yeah. Juice for.
Yeah. She wants to go on the TV show. She's taking all the drugs. It's mad. So it feels likely that she was going to reveal a list of people. Is that what people think?
So we had Lionel on, Lionel Media, and he's like really close to things. And he said that, you know, with the Pam Bondi, with the pressure on her now, because they did that BS announcement of the Epstein list where they gave it to those guys with the clipboards, those influencers, and it was all stuff that we've known for 5 years in our community. So a lot of flack came down upon her. So there's this pressure on her now to release something real, but they're getting the runaround. So the timing of Virginia's unalivement is really suspicious to the JE community.
The what community?
Jeffrey Epstein community.
Oh, yeah. That's like people looking into it. And some people, I saw someone on your channel was saying that like UK cops should be looking into this.
Okay, so Virginia made allegations against Prince Andrew at 3 separate locations. So one of the locations was an Epstein property in America. One was at the property that we doorstepped in London, and one was at a property on the island. Now, what she said about the island was the most heinous, because she said she was at a swimming pool orgy with underage girls with Prince Andrew. These underage girls were come from this pipeline from Jean-Luc Brunel, who was also found hung in his prison in France, and of the second procurer after Maxwell. And all these girls had like East European sounding names, and Epstein and Jean-Luc Brunel and Prince Andrew were joking they were the easiest ones to do these things to, because they can't even speak any English. Now you've got the jurisdiction of London coming into play because of the allegations of what happened in London. So
But they're not looking into it, really, are they?
no, who's going to look into anything involving the Queen's favourite son? He's not going to end up on a prison yard with the Aryan Brotherhood prison gang, giving him some of that because of the nature of his chomo jacket.
Yeah. So what happened when you doorstepped one of the locations?
So the location with the famous banister, and where supposedly the bathtub wasn't big enough for both of them, where they went and had carnal relations. We knocked on it and nobody answered. And James, the cameraman, is out there, shout out Underground Films, and I'm just doing commentary. And then all of a sudden the door opened and it was the cleaner. We were like, oh, can we come in? Blah, blah, blah. And we're having a little chat with the cleaner. I'm like, James, film the banister, film the banister, film the banister.
What was on the banister?
It's the infamous banister from the photo. You know, the Andrew and Epstein and Andrew and Maxwell and Virginia, you know, they were all sat together in that space, which Lady Victoria Hervey went on Piers Morgan, and she snuck in pretending wanted to be a buyer, and she told Piers Morgan she'd measured the dimensions and they couldn't possibly fit in that space. She's obviously never been on the London Underground. But anyway, she had a guy facing forward, and Andrew's actually sideways on the pictures.
Right.
Yeah, her math's a bit cuckoo.
Bloody hell. And so you imagine that's where things went on in that London residence.
Well, yeah, Virginia alleged that she was told, you know, you're going to have to do this with the prince. What you did in America, you're going to have to do it again, and you're going to have to do it again on the island. So there was 3 separate occasions where she's alleged that she had intercourse with Prince Andrew.
I've seen also recent allegations, more people talking about actual underage, like young girls on that island. Have you heard about that?
Yeah, so Jean-Luc Brunel would scout for his modelling agency across Eastern Europe, go to these, you know, poorer families, tell them he was going to make their daughters a superstar and that kind of thing. But he had this pipeline where he was fast-tracking these girls into America. They were getting express visas from the immigration into these properties owned by Epstein and the Wexner property in New York. And these girls were getting housed, and the abuse was occurring in these properties, and they were going out to other wealthy individuals as well. Now, Epstein joked, according to Virginia, that he had been given a birthday present of 12-year-old triplets by Jean-Luc Brunel, and Epstein was boasting about how good the blowjobs were, the oral sex was, from these 12-year-old triplets.
Jesus Christ. I can't even... this is mental. So that's what's not really made it into mainstream news, I don't think, because they talk about sort of 16-year-old, 17, 18-year-old, don't they? They haven't been speaking about 12-year-olds.
That story has been suppressed, but it was documented in the paperwork that Virginia filed. I think it was to do with Maxwell in the beginning. That's how it all got into court.
You've got an Epstein survivor coming on your channel. It's out soon. What's that about?
Yeah, so I've just interviewed Juliet Bryant, who I did interview years ago, but that got banned as well. But we've done about an hour and a half with Juliet. I think it's the best interview she's done with us. Phenomenal woman. She spent almost 2 years with Epstein and Maxwell. So she was out of South Africa, and she ended up getting spotted as a model when she was a teenager. And then as she's submitting her work and stuff, falls into the clutches of Epstein and Maxwell, who took her to the States, took her to the island. The evil deeds began.
How's it affected her life now?
Terribly. She's traumatized. She's living in a secure compound with attack dogs. They were jumping around in the back while I was interviewing her. But she was taken to places like trips, and she was on the Lolita Express with Kevin Spacey, with Bill Clinton, and all these huge names. And she was saying that, you know, when Bill Clinton would come out of a certain room, there was a smell of death, like corpses and cleaning chemicals attached to him. So she gives all these details of weird things surrounding huge names. And, you know, you mentioned Prince Andrew as being untouchable. Bill Clinton is another one who's untouchable. There was dozens of times he flew on the Lolita Express, and on the flight logs, his name's right there. And it's got all of these East European sounding girls with him on those flights. And he leaves his security detail behind.
Is that right? Because I think for a long time, I guess I want to sort of be that boring guy who goes, well, you know, if I'd been invited to some sort of party of some sort of billionaire on an island and I didn't know much about what was going on, you know, now that I've heard about Epstein, I'd be a bit careful. But maybe a few years ago, oh, that sounds fun. Maybe I'll take my wife and we'll go on a nice holiday. And I want to be careful about the flight logs, because I'm sure some people, I mean, Stephen Hawking was on one of them, wasn't he?
All right, let's go before the flight logs then.
Yeah.
So I've written a book, Clinton, Bush and CIA Conspiracies, and I researched the hell out of the Clinton crime family. And that's what led me to Epstein. So he was a serial rapist and cokehead.
Bill Clinton?
Yes.
We have to legal this.
All right. I'm going to allege that Bill Clinton was a serial rapist and cokehead going back to when he was the governor of Arkansas. And it was the CIA, they wanted the sleaziest, most corrupt governor to choose that state to smuggle the white powder in from South America to finance these wars against the communists in Nicaragua. And Bill Clinton provided the state security for the drug drops. And his own brother, half-brother, Roger Clinton, was busted buying coke from an undercover cop and recorded saying, some of this is for Bill, he's got a nose like a vacuum cleaner. And that cop knew if he didn't out that arrest really quickly, it would all get covered up. So they put Roger Clinton in prison to show that no one is above the law and that the Clintons are moral, upstanding pillars of the community. Meanwhile, he's got multiple allegations of raping women, sexual assaults, and Hillary Clinton tracked a lot of these women down with private investigators, threatened their lives, pets were murdered, people were thrown off balconies, and this is the genesis of the hashtag Clinton body count. They had a coroner, Fahmy Malek, who, when Bill's mum had accidentally unalived someone when she was working in the medical profession, Fahmy Malek had come in and he adjusted the cause of death. So Bill Clinton owed him for the rest of his life. And Fahmy Malek would come in, and if you had been shot in the head or if someone had strangled you, he would say that you drowned in a swimming pool. Some of the rulings were that bizarre. People need to research #Clinton body count and Fahmy Malek's rulings, because there are dozens of them. I've done a whole chapter on those in Clinton, Bush, and CIA conspiracies. Yeah,
This is what it's like having dinner with you.
Trump brought those women because they settled. The women he'd raped settled out of court and signed NDAs, so they're never allowed to talk about it. Jennifer Flowers, etc. Trump brought them to sit near the front row when he was debating Hillary Clinton. They couldn't speak, but he brought them as a show of force.
So he knows.
It's common knowledge that these women have settled all these lawsuits with Bill Clinton. It's common knowledge that he was a huge cokehead back then. He was hospitalized for damage to his nasal septum, and Hillary said to all the staff, if you breathe a word of this to anyone, you'll lose your jobs. You'll never get a job again as long as you live. They were terrified of Hillary. Hillary's law firm, Rose Law Firm. This is how they were laundering a lot of the money that was coming in from the white powder, from the coke deals they were doing with the CIA. And it was because Clinton was playing ball with the CIA. He parlayed that into getting the White House. The coke operation was run by George H.W. Bush, who was fighting the war on drugs, saying Pablo Escobar was the bogeyman. Meanwhile, he had Felix Rodriguez from the CIA and Oliver North, who kept diaries of what he was doing, documented in these South American countries with the white powder. These guys were bringing it in, and they chose Clinton, Arkansas, to bring it in because he was the most corrupt governor. So he was heavily into the white stuff. Terry Reid wrote an excellent book called Compromised. He was a co-pilot with Barry Seal. Barry Seal was bringing it in. I wrote a book about him, American Made, Who Killed Barry Seal. And in Compromised, Terry Seal didn't realize at the time what was happening. Barry wasn't telling him what they were transporting, but he cottoned on, and then they threatened his life. And when he tried to out Bill Clinton, they did a huge hit piece. I think it was the New York Post, making Terry Reid out to be a nutcase. And they criminalized him and his wife. They put them in prison to try and suppress him from getting this out. But Alex Jones did a lot exposing the Clinton drug trafficking, the raping, just the insane behavior of him as the governor of Arkansas.
So you would say, with all of that in mind, and him being on the flight logs with lots of Soviet-sounding women, it would be naive of me to suggest he might just have been going for a holiday.
I would say that he has proclivities, based on my research, that have led me to believe there's a high probability factor. He was diddling East European girls being brought in by Jean-Luc Brunel to the Epstein human transportation network.
Do you think there were British celebrities and elites, Andrew aside, that were involved?
Well, the commonality between the Epstein ring and the Diddy ring is Naomi Campbell.
Was she the model?
Yeah.
What's she getting involved in?
When you talk about the satanic PDF elite rings, she's everywhere as like I don't want to make any allegations, actually, because I'm not...
Oh, you don't? You don't, Shaun? Oh, that's interesting. Okay, well, we'll scrap the first
I'm going to bite my
minutes.
tongue on that one.
Bloody hell. For a long time, as I say, I thought this was, it's a really difficult position for somebody who's a skeptic like me to be in, because so much of this stuff has turned out to be true. And I'm trying to work out, okay, but I mean, Savile is another one you're an expert on, right? Did you see recently that reform candidate was defending Savile? Do you know there are defenders of Savile out there on the internet?
What was it Sonia Poulton told us about that? When they tried to get a political movement going to legalize the PDFs, the exchange, Pi.
Yeah.
Pi.
But I think some people are suggesting Savile didn't do it.
People are ingrained in certain beliefs. I mean, my granny would probably, if she was still alive, would probably insist that Savile didn't do it. She was, watching him 24/7. He was like the biggest celebrity in the country, wasn't he?
Yeah.
It shatters someone's belief system when they are confronted with something like someone you've idolized for most of your life, who you think is one of your biggest celebrities ever, is actually a complete and utter monster. It's like George H.W. Bush when he was fighting the war on drugs. He hosted a dinner. And at that dinner party, one of the people said to him, you're posing with all these cocaine seizures, fighting the Pablo Escobar cartel, he's the boogeyman. And on the other hand, you're bringing it in through the CIA, the Contras, supporting them because, Iran-Contra and all that stuff. How can you get away with that? And he said, in the eyes of the public, it's so far beyond what they can perceive that the guy who's the president, who's the good guy, who's fighting the war on drugs, could possibly be bringing it in through the intelligence agencies. He said it's so far removed, you could say that to someone in plain day, and they would never believe it.
So is that how Savile got away with it? Because it was just so mad that the most famous guy on TV in Britain was doing all this.
Savile got away with it. The answer to that is extremely complex and falls back on his connections, which I can go into more detail. Goes back to how he had structured anyone reporting him to the police to feed back to his lunch club officer, which I can go into in more detail. And the survivors, like how frightened they were. Like in Stoke Mandeville Hospital, for example, it's documented that nurses, if Savile was trying to fiddle with some disabled little girl or something, and that girl complained to the nurse or wrote something on a note and tried to pass it to a doctor, and then the nurses would just come back and say, that's Jimmy. He's raising millions of pounds. What can we do about it? That's Jimmy. That's just the way he behaves. So there was like a Benny Hill culture back then, whereby when I was a kid, I'm watching Benny Hill, and it's showing dirty old men chase beautiful young women in suspenders and stockings down streets and through countryside and pinch their bums to music. It's going. So moral relativism again. You're getting maladjusted, warped by the BBC and these other people who are putting out these perverted programs to think this is normal. And grannies and people who go way back to before that era look at Savile's, was it his assistant or his secretary, who to this day thinks he's innocent. Because it would shatter her belief system to think that he'd done it. So to get into more detail then about how Savile got away with it. So Savile had a weekly lunch club for the Leeds police. And there are beliefs that some of the girls, the teenagers, he was passing them on to them as well. Whenever anyone complained about Savile across the country, those notes through the police would end up on the lap of one of Savile's pals from his weekly lunch club. And hey-ho, they subsequently disappeared. So he was insulated in that respect. But he was also insulated because of the powerful connections he had, and people were so scared to report him because they feared what would happen to them. He was always very vocal about lawfare as well. So, for example, when the Surrey police did finally interview him, if you ever listen to that recording or read the transcript of it, he kind of takes complete control of the interview. He's very pally with them, and they're like looking up to him. They're very respectful, but he gets more sinister towards the end, where he's like, I'm quick to get anyone at the Old Bailey, and I want everyone to know I've got top lawyers and all that. Yeah, he's saying all these scary things. So people were terrified to go up against the establishment he was connected with and the resources. Papal knighthood, knighthood from Thatcher and the Queen, Freemason, all kinds of connections. His links to the army, the Marines. That's how he came in under Mountbatten. Mountbatten was doing stuff with the Marines, and he would just basically walk into Buckingham Palace and waltz around.
Bloody hell.
Yeah.
Well, Mountbatten, because he was said to have also been one of these PDF files, as we have to call them on YouTube. Is there a suggestion they were sort of in cahoots, or they knew about one another in that sense?
Well, they're both dead, so it's not defamation.
So say what we want.
To say that I believe that Savile was procuring for a network, and that network included some of the highest people in society, including members of the royal family, including Mountbatten. Yeah.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? I mean, do you find there's a connection between Savile and Epstein in the end? I'm just thinking that it's just this mad coincidence that it keeps going back to the royal family.
So, if you look at the intelligence networks, Savile was instrumental in trying to broker peace in Northern Ireland. So Savile was definitely working for MI5 and MI6. He would visit a lot of foreign countries as well in kind of an undercover capacity. So, and then if you look at Epstein's intelligence to the CIA and other intelligence agencies, I'd say that's where the networks overlap. I wouldn't say that Savile and Giuffre were on the blower together, but the networks definitely overlapped over time. I mean, Savile had an offending span of 50 years and male, female victims ranging from 2 years old up into the 70s.
Yeah.
And he was just like this centerpiece of the BBC. I mean, when I was growing up, it was all Jim will fix it. And he was always creepy to me. I much preferred watching other shows. I never was into that. Yeah.
Have you given much thought to what made the man?
Yeah, I have given thought to what made the man. So, Savile was considered a miracle child by his mother because he got ill, and for 2 years they thought he was going to die and his eyes wouldn't close. And when he did survive, and his mother was very religious, it created this weird bond in the family where he felt really special. And then when he went down the mines, there was a situation down there where there was accidents and all kinds of stuff. It was really dangerous, and the guys would come up all covered in. And Savile went down there, and he knew the power by then of like magic and having this supernatural aura. And he went down. He would come up like without any soot on him, wearing these weird clothes, like it hadn't affected him at all. And then he became a DJ in the Manchester area and in the north, in Leeds, and connected to the underworld, got into wrestling, torturing people in the basement of one of his clubs. There's rumours that he was connected to Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, that the Sutcliffe's leaving of the corpse outside of Savile's flat was an honorary act from Sutcliffe to Savile, because later on, when Sutcliffe's in Broadmoor, they are like that. Savile was brought in as a suspect in the Yorkshire Ripper killings,
Wow.
the sex workers. And there's also a theory that he could have known the Moors murderers from when he was doing the nightclub circuit in the north of England as well.
What's something that people don't know about Jimmy Savile?
Probably those two things I just said about his connections with the serial killers,
Yeah.
and how close that he was to them in Broadmoor. I mean, Edwina Curry gave him the keys, and he had access to do whatever he wanted in there. And there's allegations that he molested people in there as well.
What role did the BBC play, directly or indirectly, in enabling or protecting him? And also, have they learned their lessons? I'm thinking of Hugh Edwards and things like, and it's different scale, Hugh Edwards, but it's, awful nonetheless.
All right, so there was a survivor called Claire McAlpine that was portrayed in the Netflix show, because the subtitle of this book, Untouchable Jimmy Savile, is that it goes way beyond, what was it called? A British Horror Story. Is that what it was called? British Horror
something
Story,
like
the
that.
Netflix one. All right, so we interviewed Kelly Gold, who was a dancer at Top of the Pops, a teenager. And Claire McAlpine, I think, was 15 years old. So in the Netflix show, it kind of showed like Savile just like isolating these people and taking advantage of them. But according to Kelly Gold, there was like lots of BBC staffers were doing the screening process for Savile and the enabling, and not just for Savile, for multiple other celebrities. So Claire McAlpine, who ended up unaliving herself over this, it was really sad, kept a diary. And she also became pregnant, and she kept a diary that she's been sleeping with famous acts on Top of the Pops. And when the mum found the diary, handed it over to the cops, they wouldn't do anything. They eventually lost the diary. And the BBC just completely closed ranks. And, you know, they made these girls out to be terrible people, which is something that they often invert it, like in the Franklin scandal. They call them child sex workers and things like that, which Sonia Poulton schooled me on. I used that term once, and she told me off. When I was researching one of these cases, and he would go to, we interviewed a lady who was a survivor of, what was it called? Duncroft Girls' School, that's the word I was looking for. He called it his sweet shop. So he would show up in his Rolls Royce. The lady, the headmistress, was a real Savile enabler. She worshipped him, and anything that happened to those girls, she said they had it coming.
Wow.
They were basically just out of control sluts as far as she was concerned. So he would roll up in his Rolls Royce, and he would bring the girls like perfume and sweets and stuff to seduce them, and then take them out to the countryside and get them to give him oral sex and things like that. The cops pulled him over one time and knocked on his window. I mean, this is how insulated he was and how cocky he was. And the cops looked in. There was this 15-year-old girl in there with Jimmy, and the cop said to Jimmy Savile and the girl, you know, is everything all right? And Jimmy's like, yeah, I'm just waiting for her to turn 16 at midnight. Now off you fucking go. If you want to fucking save your job, I'll have you, basically. That was the gist of the conversation. And when that cop got back to the police station and told his superiors what happened, they said, yeah, we'll all lose our jobs if you say anything about Jimmy Savile.
Bloody hell.
Yeah, so he called them his sweet shops. You know, sadly, the lady we interviewed, lovely woman, but really traumatized. It was a quid pro quo. Go to Top of the Pops. They'll get him in the dressing rooms at the BBC, do the evil deed, take him back to Duncroft or, you know, wherever they were procuring from, give him these, you know, sweets and stuff like that, and tell them they could dance. They would be filmed on Top of the Pops dancing. So they would come back for more. This is how groomed and indoctrinated these poor young girls were. I mean, have you seen the video on Top of the Pops where Savile puts his hand up the girl's skirt and she just jumps for her life?
Yeah. Horrifying.
In plain sight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there others, do you think, and maybe without necessarily getting me in legal trouble, who have been at the BBC for some time that have been getting involved in those kinds of things?
So, Andrew, I think that the BBC is just a hotbed of, you've got to be in the club to work there. And that club is the satanic PDFs, I'll sell my child for fame, that level of club that we see in Hollywood and that we see in London.
So I guess that's where we agree but disagree, because I don't see, I mean, satanic and things like, I just see it as like a bunch of people who are all looking after their own jobs. They see something that they shouldn't really, as you said about the police regarding Savile, they see something that they should probably report. They should definitely report, but they go, oh gosh, what if that gets me in trouble? I'm just going to wait and let someone else do it. And that's how it, which is almost as, that's just as cowardly.
All right, so what is the most evil act you can do in this world? I believe that is molesting a child.
Yeah.
And to me, that's as satanic as it gets. So for anyone to do that, to enable it, to harbor it, and to protect it when it's exposed is a satanic organization. You know, we did a video about how satanic is the current Pope and the Vatican, and they house and harbor and enable with their fancy lawyers one of the biggest PDF rings in the world. I was housed with people in prison. One guy, he was a pilot, really well-educated guy, but he became the black sheep of his family because he was molested by a priest when he was a kid. And he showed me the legal discovery, how they had houses on every street, the Catholic Church. Well, how can they have houses on every street? Because they've got these Catholic care homes where they tell the old people, we're going to give you a place in heaven. Sign your house over to us. You got that place in heaven guaranteed. You don't even have to live there. We could take you over to the Catholic care home. It's an absolute sickening thing that they are doing. And when the allegations come out, they bring in these high-priced lawyers financed by the contributions of people like me who was raised Catholic, I was an altar boy, to pay for these lawyers so that these PDFs don't go to prison and get long sentences. They get slaps on the wrist, or even worse than that. One documentary I watched, was it Sins of Our Father? Catholic Aubrey, I can't remember. He's an Irish priest. There's a wiki page about him. They basically told the families this will never happen again. There will be consequences. And they just kept moving him 20 miles away to another diocese where he was doing it over and over again with hundreds of victims enabled by the Catholic Church. It's absolutely sickening.
Do you think Savile was a believer? Because he died clutching his cross, didn't he?
So Savile, I don't think he had any morals, but he joked about having a moral dilemma whereby when he was at the pearly gates, he would hope that all of his good deeds, all of the money he'd raised, all of his charitable stuff would offset his bad deeds. His epitaph was, it was good while it lasted. And the only thing he seemed to care about was his dead mum.
Yeah.
And which I feel led to him being involved in necrophilia. He kept all of his mum's clothes dry cleaned, and he spent days with her corpse. And he even, he went all these creepy trips with her when he was getting on in his years, and she was still alive. Just a really strange relationship. Other members of his family have also had allegations and criminal indictments pertaining to abusing kids. It's
an interesting facet of psychology. You see these there are surveys that have been done. Studies that have been done. People who do a lot of charity and do a lot of good work feel like they can be, just on a basic level, ruder or meaner to other people because they've got this feeling of, I did my good job, I did my good deed, I can be mean now. And I suppose if you take that to an absolute extreme, you have. I had someone on recently who was talking about the BBC Children in Need, who found that they were, she was the chair of Children in Need, and they were funding LGBT Youth Scotland, who was at one point run by a PDF file and has been involved in all sorts of things like that. And that's the kind of thing we're talking about, charity. You sort of feel, maybe there's a feeling inside with these kind of psychopaths, well, I've done my charity, now I'll do my thing.
This is the thing, the satanic PDF ring that has the power, they're not out there doing rituals in fields. They're out there setting up charities, showing how benevolent they are. Look at the Clinton Foundation. They were going to save Haiti. And if you look at how much of that money was spent on 5-star hotels and first-class flights going around the world, it was the bulk of it. The Clintons just living it up. Meanwhile, people who work for them, one of them was arrested trying to take children out of Haiti. She said that their parents had died in a disaster. But when their parents showed up, this woman got arrested. But the Clintons bailed her out and put her in, I think she's working on a child safety hotline, gave her a job. That can all be researched. It's all available on Google.
It's mad, isn't it? I suppose you can flip it around and sort of, so people who do these horrible things have a need to do more charity, I suppose. Oxfam was another example. Oxfam, they were found to be bullying and molesting people around the world.
Okay, so they hide under charity and they pay less taxes under charity. So if you set up a foundation, you can go around the world pretending to do all these great deeds. You're on this trip like Juliet Bryant was on with Epstein and Kevin Spacey and all these other huge names. And she's getting R-worded by people and it's all getting financed by this charity money. She was there while this was happening with Bill Clinton.
It's infuriating. I suppose with Savile as well, I want to know who knew. And there was that famous moment or infamous moment of Louis Theroux, and he said to Jimmy Savile in the back of a car, and he said, he mentioned the allegations. It's the only time I think I've ever seen anyone, or maybe one or two others did actually, mention these things to Savile while he was alive. What did you make of that?
So Johnny Rotten knew. The first song I ever bought, which was a record back then, was Holidays in the Sun by the Sex Pistols. I don't want a holiday in the sun. And then God Save the Queen was another one. And Johnny Rotten knew. He said it back then. And he said, I think he later on added that the reason they were banned from the BBC was because they were out in Savile. I remember when they got banned, the songs went straight to the top. Got to buy it because it's banned. I was about 10 years old, I think.
That's mad. Yeah. Okay. I want to know a bit about your life story. I already know it, but you were a smuggler of what we call E, because we can say the word ecstasy, I suppose, can't we?
Disco biscuits.
Disco biscuits. How does someone who seems, I guess you probably do seem a bit mad, but you're quite chilled when, because I go to dinner with you. You don't seem like this mad drug smuggling. How did that happen?
Wild man and crystal meth.
Wild man was your best friend?
Yeah. I mean, I was a stockbroker gone wild, basically. A nerdy business studies graduate who ended up with gangsteritis, which is a term that comes from a mafia guy I met called Two Tonys, 744 plus years. He was in prison. He took me under his wing to write his book, The Mafia Philosopher. And he said gangsteritis is when, like a nerdy person like me, they've watched too many movies like Scarface or The Sopranos, and they meet someone like him, and then they think they're Mr. Cool Guy, but next thing, they're getting turned upside down and hung off a balcony and getting fleeced by the real gangsters. But I had wild man. So my gangsteritis was insulated from the consequences of getting hung upside down off of a balcony by a wild man who was a genuine gangster. He was 29.5 stone, 6'2" when he died. His fists were twice the size of mine. It was all human size teeth marks on his fists. So when he was a kid, he grew massive and he started picking up school teachers and putting them in rubbish bins.
And he was at school with you, was he?
No, he was at Fairfield High School, the Protestant school, because I'm a Catholic. I was at the Catholic school.
Right.
So they put him outside raking leaves with the caretaker because they were so scared of him. And we would go to a tree at the top of Widnes. There was a quarry, Pexhill Quarry, and there was a tree overlooking the quarry called the Thinking Tree. Me, Wild Man's cousin Hammy. And it was like, what are you going to do when you grow up, kind of a conversation. And Wild Man would say, I'm going to prison because I've got red dots in my head telling me to hurt people.
Oh, bloody hell.
And I'd say to Hammy, Wild Man, I'm going to go to America, make $1 million, fly you guys over. And Wild Man, you're not going to go to prison. I'm going to make this $1 million and get you a job as a wrestler, and you're going to channel that aggressive energy into it and fight Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan, the British Bulldog, and all these people. This is how idealistic I was. Yeah. But I did fulfill the promises I made on the Thinking Tree. Wildman did fulfill. His nature took him to prison. And 5 or 6 years later, I brought them all over, and my life completely changed direction to
America.
From working I've been working solidly in the stock market for 5-6 years, brought them over, life just completely changes direction from that decision. Yeah.
Were you getting in physical fights yourself?
Wildman would put his fist next to mine and just say, I am you, you are me, la. These fists.
How much did you consume at that point?
But Wildman didn't have to beat anyone up when we had the Disco Biscuit Empire. Wildman would just move in with anyone who owed us money, and they would be terrified because immediately he would invite all the homeless people in. He was king of the homeless people. They loved him wherever he went because he would just invite them in wherever he lived. He'd have pimps, sex workers, like transgender Native American street walking sex workers, gangbangers, Russian mafia, Italian mafia, Chicano gangsters. This is how I met all of the people. Wildman opened that world for me, that opened that door. And that's how I met these connections that formed the criminal enterprise. Because Wildman's first visit, he ended up getting deported for being a menace to society by the judge and banned from America. He was on the rampage doing stuff with this striptease girl who liked to taser her clitoris. Got in touch with me recently, actually. Shout out to her. And he ended up, he was unhousable. They were living in Tempe Beach Park under a tree with a baseball bat and a Rambo knife. And 2 guys were coming every night and bullying the homeless people. And Wildman just smashed the shit out of them. And then all these homeless people, he became their king in Tempe Beach Park.
Wow.
So we had this humanitarian, he rooted for the underdog side for him as well. But yeah, so the judge banned him and he came back later on, and I had Mission Impossible style teams of people smuggling him back in through Mexico and Canada multiple times.
Jesus.
Yeah, but at the peak of it then, we were bumping heads with Sammy the Bull Gravano's crew, which a huge documentary just came out on Max in America. It was number 2, documenting that beef we had with the Gravanos.
Yeah, you were called English Shaun.
Yes.
I watched that. It was great.
Yeah.
It's English Shaun. Because it just seems mad that this even really happened. I mean, do you not fear for your life at all? Do you think you might be a psychopath?
So when you when you're on drugs for over 10 years, the drugs puts a cloud in your head that you don't know is there. Yeah. It's scrambling your decision-making processes, and it's telling you, you're Mr. Cool Guy. You're living like a character out of a movie, like Pulp Fiction, we would say. We're never going to get arrested. We're above the law. We've been getting away with it so long. We were delusional. And I'm surrounding myself with people who are doing equally insane behavior. And we're all going down this slippery slope together. And nobody's putting the brakes on. So that SWAT team came May 16, 2002, and that cloud lifted up my head. And I looked back, and I was like, whoa, how on earth are you still alive? Was the first thing I thought. Most of my mates who were partying with back then are dead now. I get every year, no one bites the dust. Yeah.
They're still in that world.
From still being in that world, yeah. R.I.P. Wild man himself went just over 2 years ago, multiple organ failure, which I believe was because the damage he did. You know, he lived hard and fast, and he made that decision. But sadly, he died in his 40s. He had to put a stent in his heart when he got arrested with me. There was multiple times in America when he was hospitalized. He'd walk around for days, get dehydrated, his heart would go. I visited him once in hospital. He had all of the things attached to him, the wires, the monitors and everything. And he asked me to give him some ecstasy and stuff, and I thought he was going to take it when he got out, when he got discharged, and he popped it right there. Next thing, beep, 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 we all had to run out to hospital.
No way.
He didn't care. He didn't care, man. He had no fear of anything, including death. Yeah.
Do you have that fear?
I appreciate every minute I am alive. And I was on the way here, I was talking to one of my guys. He had hundreds of felonies when he got arrested with us. He had a firearm, actually, like was it an MP or something? And he opened up in his living room and shot the tip of one of his fingers off and sprayed all these bullet holes in his flat. And that was like a talking point amongst our group that he'd done that. But on the way here, we were talking about everybody who's died since we have been released from prison, and how we are just, life now to me is a miracle. The infinite improbability of existence, I totally understand that. The chance that sperm in my dad's balls would meet that egg out of all those billions of sperm and come together to produce me. And I did all of these risky things that could have unalived me. And here I am, still going strong. And I've got Jen and baby Ziggy in our house, as you've seen. We're just living in the moment and loving it, man.
Do you think your dad wants his balls talked about on a YouTube channel? I know your dad's, and I don't know if he'll like that, but tough. It's too late now. It's been said.
What don't you think about that, Andrew? Think about the chance of you as a little sperm in your dad's balls, and all the sperms that came before that in your dad's balls and his balls and his balls, and then you look at the probabilities of them meeting those eggs to produce you. It's mind-blowing that we exist.
I did. My mind's blown thinking about grandparents' balls and all that.
Going back to primordial soup and how creatures mated through sense of smell.
Yeah.
And now you go back to that.
Yeah.
To that.
You probably think the CIA was involved in that. Primordial soup, CIA.
If you look at what they're putting in the sky.
Oh, don't.
To dim the sun, Andrew.
No.
And if you look at what was in the jab, the nanoparticles in the jab, and all of the autopsies they're doing now on people who had the jab, and these long white fibers that are in the corpses of the jabbed versus the unjabbed. And my sister said I was a conspiracy theorist. Because I wasn't.
You?
Yeah, because I wasn't getting the jab. This was when it all kicked off with COVID.
Yeah.
And she sent me the YouTube channel of Dr. John Campbell.
Don't.
Dr. John Campbell was recommending the jab.
Yeah.
He was on board with the WHO.
Right.
Since then, Dr. John Campbell has said if he knew everything he knew back then, he would not have got the jab.
Yeah.
He's talking about the nanobots, the genetic engineering from the jab.
Shaun's having a go because he knows I've had the jabs. He knows I've had the jabs, and any opportunity to tell me that I've got white stuff in my stringy stuff in my body.
Cancer. My mate called me.
Yeah.
He was on holiday with all his mates.
Yeah.
He works for the post office. They all had to be jabbed. He said this year, oddly enough, we've all come down with gout. Googled it. All these research studies on the correlation of gout and people have been jabbed.
I had 3 jabs, 0 gout.
Yeah, but that's extrapolation, Andrew. You know that from your expert skills in discourse and argumentation that I see you do with all of your different guests. You cannot extrapolate like that. If you look at the studies that are coming from reputable hospitals about the turbo cancers, the cancers in the young people with cancers in remission, it all just come on full force, extra strong after the jab. The dementia, the MS. I know people who had people close to them who got jabbed, gone. They were just in the 50s. Excess deaths.
I did have Dr. Asim Malhotra on. He spoke about the problems with it in a similar vein, metaphorically, not that you jab it into. But I also, I got a family friend who's a doctor, and he's a very, very serious person who wouldn't be into anything spurious. And I did say to him, I've had Dr. Asim Malhotra just talk about this. What do you think? And he just said, like, with that sort of closed eyes doctor look, they do this. Yeah, there were problems with the vaccination. There were problems with it. So I accept that.
And is he a wild partying, alcohol guzzling diabetic himself?
He is not, because why? Is that what you are?
No.
Oh,
I had a conversation with him.
What? You had a conversation with him?
Yeah, he put me next to him at the wedding.
Did I?
Yeah.
No, he wasn't at my wedding. Who was that? Diabetic. Oh, that was my mate Alice. Oh, he doesn't want to be brought up in this. That's another doctor. But
I'm confabulating.
You are confabulating. What was I going to say? Prison.
You were talking about the University of Zurich and the study.
I was
not
not.
The insider trading of 9/11 insider options.
How was prison? 5 years. Arizona's deadliest prison.
Okay, so Sheriff Joe Arpaio's jail.
Yeah.
It's considered the highest rate of death out of all the jails and prisons in America. This is the Maricopa County jail system, where I spent my first 26 months. National Geographic, who did my Banged Up Abroad episode, researched it.
Yeah.
50, 60 people died around the time I was there. They were murdering, guards were murdering prisoners. People can Google this. Scott Norberg. They murdered a blind prisoner, Brian Crenshaw, failed to produce his ID, pulverized him, went to a coma, died a few months later. Scott Norberg, mentally ill man wandering a neighborhood. They're beating him up. His face is turning blue. Female guards say, stop beating him, he's turning blue. They're like animals, they won't stop. The inmates are yelling, he's already dead, stop beating him, he's already dead. They continue to beat the corpse, turn blue and everything. Yeah, this was an insane environment where life and death was decided by whatever gang controlled you. And in my case, we came under the control of the Aryan Brotherhood prison gang, neo-Nazis. These were guys who, as soon as I walked in, they've got swastikas, lightning bolts, SS stuff. One had a Hitler Sieg Heiling over a gas chamber with Jewish people dying inside the gas chamber.
Of what? A tattoo that was?
Yeah.
It's quite intricate, isn't it?
Yeah.
Bloody hell.
Yeah.
So, but you never had, or did you, sort of racist views and things?
No, absolutely not. I was terrified of these guys. I've watched like American History X.
Yeah.
It was those guys. Oh. Bit like, there was a bit of Shawshank people in I could be a friend to you.
Yeah.
Shower scene.
Were they the sort of gay
There was
fellas?
some of that going on as well. But mostly, whatever race you are, you come under the control of that gang. So if you're white, it's the ABs, Aryan Brotherhood. Black, the Mau Mau. Mexicans, Mexican Mafia. You got the new Mexican Mafia, the Chicanos, who are at war with the old Paisas, who are born in Mexico versus born in America. That's craziness as well, a lot of violence between those two gangs. But anyway, so I walk in. First off, we're in the horseshoe formation of cells. We're all the new arrestees. Fortunately, Wildman was with us because the females were getting off the bus as well. And the new arrestees started heckling the females. And Wildman sees him heckling the females. He's getting off the bus. The guard's yelling at him, get off. An eyebrow goes up. One eyebrow always remains completely calm when he's going to do violence. One goes up. His face remains calm. I think, oh, shit. So he gets off the top step. And the redneck guard's yelling at him, get off the step. And he's looking at the guys heckling. Wild Woman was one of the women, his partner, and her head's down. She's a tough scouser. She's usually giving off mouth. She was having a bad day. Anyway, Wild Man's on the top step. He's got this Viking's beard. Black and he's puts his chin up. He's all shackled like, you lot disrespecting our women. I'll be in there with you in a minute. I'll have any of you if you don't fucking shut up. And then he just opens his eyes and looks at them all like foam at the mouth. And he goes, you think I won't? Head back. And they all just shut the fuck up right away, man. So I didn't need fists. I had him with me.
Have you taken something today, Shaun? Oh my God.
And I've interviewed Bruno, who was in the Towers jail with me. He was an enforcer for the Italian mafia. And I said, Bruno, what did you guys think about Wild Man? And he was like, he was independent, a lone wolf maniac. We had a huge heart. We had a lot of love and respect for him. Interviewed T-Bone, who's just got after serving 30 plus years, who knew about us on the streets. And he said, yeah, everyone knew about Wild Man on the streets of Phoenix. Hell's Angels invited him to the clubhouse. This is before arrest. He went down to Mexico to pave the way for our Mexican operations. And my mate said, if Wild Man and Wild Woman misbehave in Mexico, the Mexicans will kill him. When I went down to Mexico, he was getting run around in military jeeps by cartel associates. And they were calling him El Oso de Bird because of his fighting style. He would just maul people.
El Oso.
The ABs, where Wild Man was housed, the leader of the Aryan Brotherhood in his building came up to him and said, what's your charges? And Wild Man said, I've had a long day. I just want to have a nap. And he's like, no, you have to tell us your charges. And Wild Man just knocked the guy out.
Wow.
Yeah. And then they came back and they said, look, do you want to run this building? We found out who you are. You can have his job if you want.
All right. So far, this sounds like a party. In your 5 years in the deadliest prison in America, what was your lowest point?
So I was in about 12 different facilities.
Right.
The first 26 months, I was in the jail with the highest rate of death in America. Then I was in various prisons, and then I was in a deportation prison. So what was the what point?
Lowest.
Oh, my goodness, man. So the lowest point was my second year in, when I was facing 200 years. Because I wouldn't cooperate, they doubled my charges against me. They doubled my bail bond to 1.5 million, which had automatically moved me over to maximum security. My girlfriend was my lifeline. She was visiting me 3 times a week. And they charged her with prescription pills found on the day of the SWAT team raid. They didn't have a written prescription right next to them, which is class 6 felony. Co-defendants can't visit co-defendants. So I'm now moved to max security, facing 200 years, lost about 2 stone because of the food. Breakfast is mouldy bread and green bologna, and the evening meal is a mystery meat slop called Red Death, which occasionally had a dead rat in it.
Oh.
Remember, for a couple of months in a row, they fed us eggplant, which I couldn't eat. It's almost 50 degree heat.
Aubergine.
Yeah, aubergine.
What, you just...
It was like shoe leather every night.
It can be that.
That was my main meal every night for 2 months. Was just bam, there it is.
Okay, go on.
And the swamp cooler, it's 50 degrees. Swamp cooler only worked on the day of the year the county health inspector went through the building. And then it went back to like as warm as our breath. So we're covered in skin infections and bed sores. And we're itchy, but we're sogging and we're sweaty and stinking like wet dogs. And we scratch ourselves because we're itchy and clumps of our skin comes off under our nails. And my eyelid was down here at one point, and my eye was red and there was yellow pus coming out of it. And then they cut my girlfriend off. And my lawyer comes and sees me and says, yeah, they've doubled your charges now. You're facing 200 years. You've got 20 plus charges. They all carry maximum of 10. If you go to trial, they're going to stack it to 200, and you've got serious drug offender status, which is 25 to life. And I was like, I can't do this anymore.
Did you think about that was it?
So I planned to unalive myself after a guard did a security walk so I could sit with the cockroaches and just bleed out. They came out at night. They were just all over us at night, in your ears, in your mouth. We had to wrap a wet towel around your head to keep them off you. And my cellmate was asthmatic, wakes up one morning out of breath, grabs his inhaler, shoots a live cockroach directly inside himself.
Oh.
Starts freaking out, saying it's moving around inside him, and he's trying to throw it up, and it's stuck inside him. It won't even come out.
Oh.
Even in the daytime, there were so many. They were doing cockroach races on the tables, gambling on the winner. Anyway, these were the conditions, and I'm thinking, I can't take this anymore. I couldn't sleep with the cockroaches calling. Even to this day, if Jen she does it on purpose, she tickles my hand because she knows I go like that. They would Lovely. Tickle my hand, and I'd wake up and I'd see it. I'd be like, psh, psh, just flicking them off night after night. So they had to give me some kind of meds to get me to sleep. So the pressure was on because we wouldn't cooperate. So they increased the pressure every month. And I'm thinking, I'm just going to slash my wrist and bleed out. But before I want to do it, I want to say goodbye to my family and friends. And I was allowed 7 photographs. So I get the photographs out of my mum, dad, girlfriend, sister, and I'm looking at these pictures and I'm thinking, because you're quite psyched up, if you're going to do something like this. And I'm thinking my mum's going to get a call, isn't she? Saying, your son's just killed himself in a foreign prison. And I started crying at that point and I couldn't do it. Yeah.
I'm so happy you didn't.
Yep, so that little sperm in my dad's balls is still going strong.
Fucking hell, Shaun. But knowing your mum, bloody hell, bloody hell. Listen, where can people, I've got another question for you, but where can people find all your stuff?
It's just all under my name. So I've written 17 books. They're all on Amazon under my name, Shaun Attwood, Attwood. My YouTube channel, same. What I could do is I could send you my YouTube channel link and my linked tree link. If you would kindly put that in the description box on YouTube, that would be great.
We'll put that in the description. I hope people do go over as well, because you were, in some ways, the making of me on YouTube.
No, let's give credit where credit is due. The sweat and toil and blood of Ash.
People don't know who Ash is.
Bill, Ash the guest booker, they do, because there was a conspiracy theory that Ash didn't exist.
That was on your channel, not mine. Remember where you are, mate.
Yeah. Oh, true that. Hello, new viewers, lovely viewers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Andrew we were joint co-hosts on a show called Attwood Unleashed, which was the genius of Ash, who Andrew, what's the word for it?
Hijacked.
Hijacked from me, yes.
Usurped. He now works for me.
Psychopath.
Yeah.
But Ash got these amazing guests as this show was in its fledgling years. But we have flourished since. Thanks.
Your channel's nearly at 1 million subscribers, though. So
thanks,
that's nearly 1 million. Think of that. We'll have a party when it hits 1 million. But who's a heretic you admire?
Alive or dead?
Either.
Friedrich Nietzsche, one of the most influential authors and philosophers in my life, especially his book, I might mispronounce it because I'm prison educated, Ecce Homo, is that how we pronounce it? And each chapter is very in your face, like why I'm so smart, why I write such good books. But that aside, it was his humour that made me gravitate towards his philosophy. But it was a philosophy of life, because I do life lessons talks to school kids as well as the drugs education talks. And they asked me for quotes. I managed to read over 1,000 books in just under 6 years. And the therapist would ask me in his office in prison, it's great you're reading all of this stuff, but what can you actually use in your life? And I fell back on the Stoics and also Nietzsche. Live your life like a work of art. Look at how much effort people put into a work of art. If you put that much effort into your life, look at the studio, how much effort you put into the studio. If you put that much effort into living your life, how much would the quality of your life improve? But there's, Nietzsche's got a bad rap because Hitler tried to co-opt him, distributed his books, but he wasn't a Nazi. His sister was dating a prototype Nazi. So when Nietzsche grabbed the horse, one of his final acts before he was section insanity, this prototype Nazi, because the Nazis didn't exist yet, and his sister kind of perverted his works, which led to Adolfo putting out the book. But I'm getting off subject here. So Nietzsche, it's about living in the moment and putting that effort into improving your life, which ties into the Stoic philosophy, because Epictetus, he was a slave who was freed because of his teachings. He talks about how we can choose how we react to things. It doesn't matter what's going on around us. This has been a huge thing for me. And you see in prison, the people who are getting bullied the most are the people who react the most. Well, according to Epictetus, someone can come up to your face and say, I'm going to kill your entire family and word your mum in front of you and all this stuff and slash your throat. But you could just say to yourself, that guy's having a bad day and get out of the situation. Or you could punch him in the face. That guy could pull out a knife and you could end up yourself unalived.
Yeah.
And it's hard when someone's in your face and your brain is reacting for you to extricate yourself from that situation. But if you lay this framework down, which my therapist helped me do, and then Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor in The Gladiator as well, he said that the chaos of life is like a storm at sea, but you are the promontory, the rocks jutting into the sea. And those waves can crash down upon you, but you're remaining strong and firm. And he also, it
doesn't work because you gradually become eroded over time. But nice, he probably didn't know about erosion, cliff erosion.
But Meditations is one of my favorite books. I've read that over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And he also talks about us just being particles of dust in the universe. And when I interviewed a crematorium worker recently, and he said he was watching the corpses go in, how some of them sit up and raise an arm and there's the fingers are missing, and how little babies are the hardest. They just turn to dust in these boxes. And he's gone from worrying about things, and he's got this completely calm voice, to just seeing what human beings are and how we get worked up over these things that we think are big. But in the context of the universe, we are just these specks of dust, and we've just got to get a grip and get everything into context and just appreciate what we've got. I've done a TED Talk called What Facing 200 Years Taught Me About Happiness, where I quote a lot of these philosophers. And I would say that there was a pivotal moment when I was thinking about killing myself. It was after that where I woke up the next day and a prisoner limped into my cell. He had syphilis, he had hepatitis C, and he had stomach cancer, and he had a metal rod in his leg and screw was loose and the jail wouldn't fix it, and he was in agony and he was going to die in the jail over the next couple of years. And I was thinking to myself, I was feeling so sorry for myself. I was going to kill myself. Listen to this guy. There's always somebody worse off. So it's good to have a yardstick. And getting sentenced to 9.5 years then become one of the happiest days of my life because 200 years was my yardstick. I could see when I was finally getting out. Once you're facing your life being taken away from you and you're living in a life and death environment, your $1 million house on the mountain doesn't matter anymore. Your swimming pool, your jacuzzi, your twin turbo RX-7, your life your wife, who's quite a wild character, was doing lesbian internet porn when I met her. All these material things that young lads, high testosterone fueled, think are the meaning of life. All that got crushed out of me when I was facing 200 years. And then I just went down this path of trying to self-educate and set this framework up through reading philosophy and psychology to go inside myself and address the root causes of why I got involved in drugs and crime.
Be the promontory, the cliff.
And yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And enjoy life every single day. And, having baby Ziggy and just the love that baby Ziggy gives me and Jen has completely transformed us. Yeah, he stays up a lot at night. He's a bit of a party animal. And it's wearing us down a bit and that. But the love he gives us, the unconditional love and the smiles, you can't put that into words.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to end the podcast.
Oh, thank you, man.
What a wonderful guest. People, please do go follow Shaun Attwood. We'll have the description links down below. He taught me a lot about YouTube. He's completely bonkers, of course, but very intelligent and has some of the best guests and most interesting. Nearly 1 million subscribers, so help him make it to 1 million. Hit this like and keep watching this channel.